To Stan Shamu from IG in Melbourne. Pick up that Australian dollar story. Stan, good morning to you. I guess when we look at the RBA minutes, which will be released later today, we really will be zeroing in on any commentary coming from the RBA in regards to the Australian dollar.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, yesterday a lot of market analysts, they had pinned it as the key day for the Australian dollar with a data dump from China. Now, with of course, with a lot of the data out of China coming in relatively in line with expectations, we didn't quite see the move we were expecting. But the Aussie dollar has managed to drift higher to around that 91 level. And we feel now that these RBA minutes might be the key release for the day for the Aussie dollar. Of course, the key throwaway statement from Glenn Stevens last time regarding pondering for a long time to decide whether to cut rates or not, and ultimately resulting in no change in July will be the key focus. The market will be looking to see exactly how close this decision was, and the closer the decision would have been if the RBA thinks that it was that close, then chances are we'll see renewed selling for the Aussie dollar with a little bit of resistance at this 91 level. We'll probably drop back into the 90 support, and possibly we might trade below that if that's the case. But if it does prove to be a false statement, and of course if it does prove that there was no close decision at all, and the RBA remains in a wait and see sort of mode for the Aussie for the interest rates, then absolutely the Aussie dollar could enjoy a bit of a squeeze higher in the short term. We're eyeing around that 92 level is the key level. Investors might start to look at selling again. But of course, it does seem like the US dollar side of the equation will be the key for this currency pair this week, particularly with Bernanke on the wires later on in the week.
Yeah, and I heard that we're actually expecting to get the prepared statement from Ben Bernanke released to the market early, so pre-market open. What are you expecting from Ben Bernanke? Will he be wearing his dovish or his hawkish hat?
Generally, these testimonies tend to be a little bit more hawkish than expected. Of course, that doesn't mean this will be the case this time. But of course, last week Bernanke came in quite dovish. And perhaps maybe he came in a little bit more dovish than he would have wanted to. He has really said he wants to be as transparent as possible to the market. So that's what we expect from him going forward. Of course, he has to acknowledge that the US economy has really turned a corner. And from a political standpoint as well, I think the politicians would want to hear the fact that there has been a lot of work done in the economy, and it's really starting to pay dividends at the moment. So from that perspective, then perhaps this might see some of the recent selling in the US dollar start to wane a little bit, and possibly this might lead to a bit of a recovery in the US dollar in the short term.
Okay, and then a negative for the Australian dollar. Just focusing in on the opening call for the local market, I guess drivers, what are we looking for? We're looking toward that production report coming from Rio Tinto this afternoon?
Yeah, absolutely. We're calling the Australian market up about 0.4% so far, right on the 5,000 mark. So this level has been quite elusive for the market over the past few sessions. The actual resistance level is at 5,012. So that's basically the retracement from that big move around 5246 down to the recent lows at 4,632. So that if we see a closing above that level, then this should be positive for the Aussie market in the short term. But of course, if we don't manage to close above this level, then it could prove to be resistance for the Aussie market for a little while. Of course, the miners will be key for the session. BHP's ADI is pointing to a 0.6% gain at the moment, so this should be quite good for the rest of the miners. Rio is likely to be sidelined. Of course, they've got their second quarter production report at 3 p.m. That will be the key for their stock trading today. Of course, I think a lot of analysts are expecting a bit of an improvement in the second quarter production from the first quarter, which was dogged by a lot of issues, particularly weather-related, which resulted in some plant closures for a while. So I think the general consensus is for a 5.4% rise in iron ore to about that 51.2 million tons level, while copper is expected to actually drop by about 20% due to some closures at its Kennecott mine. But a lot of analysts still feel that the improvement from the Escondida mine will help the copper production overall. And this should see Rio remain on track for the full year at about 265 million tons of iron ore production, whilst copper will be possibly slightly lower, but of course relatively steady compared to what the market was starting to price in. So overall it should be a fairly good result, and of course we will also have BHP and Fortescue later on in the week to look out for.
When it comes to Rio, Stan, ahead of earnings season, will you be looking for any commentary in regards to how the depreciating Australian dollar has been working for against Rio Tinto?
Yeah, we expect to see quite a lot of macro comments, but the majority of which I think will be China related, and what most of these miners are expecting from a China perspective. I think that's been a key issue for a lot of the miners in the recent months, particularly as China starts to get a bit more content with slower growth, possibly nearer to the 7% mark, or the mid 7% mark rather, going forward, and what implications this will have for the miners and the demand for some of their shipments.
Looking further afield, Tokyo is returning from a long weekend, essentially. What can we expect in Japan today?
Yeah, Japan's actually facing a very strong start today, up around 1.2% to 14,677. So it's looking pretty good for them at the moment. Of course, they missed out on yesterday's trade. They had that Marine Day holiday. But with the US dollar yen pushing higher overnight to a high of 100.49, then this will be quite positive for Japanese equities, being a hugely export-related market. Now, of course, we've got the BOJ minutes tomorrow. That will be another game changer for that market, of course, as it has a pretty big bearing on the yen. And of course, heading into the upper house elections, we feel that the BOJ will remain very dovish, just to help support some of the recovery that we've seen in Japan over the past few months. So yeah, it should be a pretty good week for Japan heading into these elections, and should we get a good result from Japan's elections, then that could really be the trigger for another wave of buying in Japan.
Okay, we will watch with interest and check in with you guys later on in the day. Stan Shamu from IG, thanks so much.
Cheers, Nadine.
Let's get more on that session in Wall Street, and for that I spoke earlier with CNN's Alison Kosick.
Yeah, not such a huge surprise. This is sort of the pattern that you have to get used to when the summer months come into play, and we are in the summer months here in the U.S. The Dow notched a 26th record close this year. Boeing actually was a big reason